Welcome to our latest deep dive. Right now, there is a really sprawling global story that is basically hiding in plain sight.
Yeah, it really is.
And, if you've been tracking energy markets recently, your dashboard is probably just flashing red with crude oil price jumps.
Right, mostly because of the standstill in the Strait of Hormuz. Everyone is watching that.
Exactly. But while the broader market is intensely focused on crude, there is a secondary, far more severe crisis unfolding in an entirely different sector of the energy landscape.
A completely different energy market.
Right. Today, we are investigating the acute and potentially long-term disruption of the liquefied natural gas market, or LNG.
And the dynamics driving this particular market reaction are entirely distinct from the traditional oil trade.
They really are. And to fully grasp the scale of this disruption, we're drawing heavily from a recent CNBC report by Pippa Stevens.
Yeah, that's a great piece. It features some highly revealing research from Rapidan Energy.
Specifically, the insights of their Director of Global Gas, Alex Munton. So, the mission of today's deep dive for you, the listener, is to unpack exactly why a single geographical bottleneck, coupled with one exceptionally vulnerable industrial facility, has the potential to upend the global energy supply chain to a degree that crude oil simply cannot.
It's a massive vulnerability.
It is. So to set the stage, we need to look at the catalyst. Recently, an Iranian drone attack halted Qatar's LNG output.
Right, and as a direct consequence, the maritime traffic flowing through the Strait of Hormuz has essentially ground to a halt.
And we're looking at this purely through the lens of market mechanics and infrastructure here. But the resulting economic data is just staggering.
It's absolute chaos. The initial numbers coming out of this closure reflect a market in distress. For context, roughly 20% of all global LNG flows through this specific narrow maritime corridor.
20%, that's a huge bottleneck.
Right, with the vast majority of those exports originating in Qatar. So the moment that flow is interrupted, the European natural gas markets react violently.
Violently is the right word. Within a single week of the disruption, European prices surged 63%.
63% in 1 week. We really haven't seen a single week percentage spike of that magnitude since the Russian invasion of Ukraine back in 2022.
And the real-world visual of this economic panic is fascinating to think about. While Europe is seeing that 63% spike, the Asian markets are pushing prices even higher.
Oh, absolutely. They're outbidding everyone.
We're seeing contracts trading around $23.40 per MMBtu.
And for those tracking the metrics, MMBtu stands for metric million British thermal unit. It's the standard contract volume.
Right. And at over $23, that represents a sky-high premium.
It does.
And the widening spread between European and Asian bids has created such a lucrative arbitrage opportunity that fully loaded LNG transport ships are literally making U-turns.
Right in the middle of the ocean.
Exactly. Vessels that were already halfway to Europe are physically executing U-turns on the open water to chase those Asian prices.
It's a phenomenal logistical scramble happening in real time. I mean, imagine a ship captain receiving orders to abandon the European destination and reroute to Asia midway through a voyage. It just illustrates how desperate the global bidding war has become.
It really paints a picture. But this dramatic price shock and the chaos at sea, it leads us to a structural question.
Right, the why.
Yeah, why is the natural gas market reacting with such severe volatility compared to the oil market, considering both utilize the exact same blocked strait?
It comes down to logistics. The oil sector benefits from physical workarounds that the LNG sector simply lacks.
Right, the pipeline detour.
Exactly. Consider the infrastructure of nations like Saudi Arabia and the UAE. Over the decades, they've constructed extensive overland pipeline networks.
Specifically designed to pump a significant portion of their crude oil across land.
Right, effectively bypassing the Strait of Hormuz entirely. If the maritime route is compromised, they just open the valves on the terrestrial detour routes.
But LNG inherently lacks that terrestrial flexibility. There is no overland pipeline alternative connecting Qatar's gas fields directly to these desperate European or Asian markets.
None at all. To transport natural gas across oceans, it must undergo a profound physical transformation. You have to cool it down to a liquid state.
And then it must be loaded onto these highly specialized, insulated maritime vessels.
Without a pipeline detour, the entire supply chain becomes completely tethered to those specific ships.
And these are not standard cargo freighters.
No, an LNG tanker is essentially an incredible complex floating thermos. They can cost upwards of $250 million to construct.
$250 million for one ship.
Exactly. And if those high-value vessels cannot safely navigate through the strait due to security risks or even skyrocketing war risk insurance premiums, the gas is physically trapped.
So the market volatility we're seeing is the realization that there is literally no alternate delivery mechanism.
Right. We're looking at a profound logistics trap where transport vessels are paralyzed.
However, the maritime bottleneck is only one side of the equation.
Right. The source of the gas itself represents an entirely different layer of systemic fragility.
The contrast in how these two energy resources are extracted and processed is really illuminating. If you look at the Middle Eastern crude oil apparatus, it's highly decentralized.
Very decentralized. You're dealing with production spread across thousands of wells, numerous separate processing facilities, and multiple sovereign borders.
Right, so if one specific node or regional pipeline network goes offline, the broader system retains enough resilience that other fields can increase output to stabilize the network.
But Qatari LNG operates on the complete opposite end of the spectrum.
The production is not distributed across a wide geographic footprint at all.
No, it is entirely centralized at one single, sprawling industrial complex known as Ras
Laffan, and that centralization creates a singular point of failure for a critical portion of the global energy supply.
Which is terrifying from a security standpoint. Alex Munton from Rapidan Energy characterized the Ras Laffan facility using a very stark term in that CNBC report.
What did he call it?
He referred to it as a sitting duck.
A sitting duck! Wow! And the Rapidan Energy research goes further, suggesting that the recent drone attacks were perceived by the market as just a warning shot.
Right. They point out that if there were a dedicated, intentional effort to inflict major damage on Qatar's LNG capacity, defending this single sprawling node is an incredibly complex task.
It might be an impossible task. It's a vast industrial footprint, but ultimately it is just one solitary location.
And the implications of that centralization become incredibly daunting when you consider the mechanics of recovery.
This is the part that really surprised me.
Yeah, because if a decentralized oil field suffers damage, repair crews can isolate the affected area while the rest of the country's infrastructure continues to pump crude.
But if this single vital LNG complex halts operations, which is exactly what has just occurred, resuming production requires navigating an engineering hurdle that the market seems to be severely underestimating.
Bringing us to the technical reality of the facility itself. The process of getting this gas liquefied and moving again involves extreme physics.
Extreme physics. We're talking about the cryogenic industrial process required to cool natural gas down to minus 260 degrees Fahrenheit.
Minus 260. And that shrinks its volume by a factor of 600, so it can actually fit onto those ships.
Right. That cryogenic process requires an incredibly intricate, highly sensitive environment.
You are managing extreme thermal dynamics and intense pressures across a massive footprint of compressors and turbines.
And subjecting that equipment to rapid temperature fluctuations can cause severe thermal stress.
Or outright catastrophic failure.
Which brings up a startling detail from the CNBC report. The entire Ras Laffan plant has never been taken completely offline before.
Never. They are operating in entirely uncharted engineering territory right now.
Because of the sheer complexity of the thermodynamics involved and the astronomical financial liabilities at stake.
Right, factoring in the value of the facility itself, the $250 million tankers, the specialized maritime insurance required to move them.
Facility operators cannot simply toggle production on and off based on the daily news cycle of regional escalations.
They require absolute 100% certainty that the maritime corridor is secure before they even initiate the delicate restart protocols.
Because they can't risk cooling the system down, loading a ship, and then having it stranded at the dock because the strait is suddenly deemed impassable again.
Exactly. The Rapidan research emphasizes that due to these stringent technical and safety realities, returning the plant to full operational capacity is a process measured in weeks, not days.
Weeks. So the sudden price spikes indicate that global energy traders had not adequately priced in just how long Qatari output would be removed from the global board.
Not at all. Which forces us to look at the global reaction. With Qatar offline for an extended multi-week period and billion-dollar fleets of transport ships stranded or rerouting mid-ocean, the rest of the world has to find a way to cope.
Coping with a sudden, severe deficit in energy supply. And the immediate instinct for many market observers is to look toward the United States for relief.
Right, because the U.S. currently holds the position of the world's largest LNG exporter.
Yet, the U.S. infrastructure doesn't have the slack to simply absorb this global shortfall, does it?
Not even close.
Yeah.
The American export terminals are already operating at functional maximum capacity.
There is virtually no idle capacity sitting in reserve anywhere in the world that can be quickly spooled up to replace the missing Qatari volumes.
And when a critical resource simply does not exist to be purchased at any price, the market imposes a very harsh physical reality.
Demand destruction.
Demand destruction.
This concept plays out in very tangible ways across the global economy. Without excess U.S. supply to fill the void, industrial consumers and power grids are literally forced to dial back their operations.
They have to consume less because the molecules of gas physically are not there.
To maintain baseline grid stability and keep economies functioning, we are seeing nations revert to older, cheaper alternatives.
In practical terms, that means abandoning natural gas and restarting dormant coal-fired power plants.
Wow!
It is a forced regression in global energy consumption patterns, driven entirely by the necessity of surviving an acute shortage.
Facilities that had transitioned to cleaner-burning natural gas are finding themselves with no choice but to burn coal just to keep the lights on and the assembly lines moving.
And it gets worse. The CNBC article cites a recent Bloomberg report indicating that this is not merely a temporary supply shock that will resolve itself by next quarter.
Qatar Energy is reportedly delaying the planned expansion of its gas facilities until 2027 as a direct result of this ongoing crisis.
2027. The current supply squeeze is altering long-term infrastructure timelines.
The delay of that expansion is perhaps the most significant long-term ramification of this entire event.
I agree. The fragility of one specific geographical transit point has rippled outward, severely delaying the future supply pipeline that the world was relying on to meet projected energy demands later in the decade.
When you step back and look at the entire landscape we have explored today, it really paints a very sobering picture of global infrastructure.
It definitely does.
We started by observing the sudden closure of the Strait of Hormuz, which triggered those dramatic mid-ocean reroutes as LNG ships chased $23 Asian premiums.
Right.
We explored the logistical constraints of natural gas, relying entirely on specialized maritime vessels rather than the resilient overland pipeline networks that crude oil utilizes.
The pipeline detour issue.
Exactly. Then we evaluated the deep vulnerability of Qatar's centralized Laffan complex, recognizing it as a singular point of failure in a sprawling global network.
The sitting duck.
The sitting duck. And finally, we examined the uncharted, highly sensitive cryogenic engineering required to restart that facility.
A delicate process that is forcing immediate global demand destruction.
A return to coal consumption and the delay of crucial infrastructure expansion until 2027.
The systemic fragility is just undeniable. And as you consider how these interconnected systems impact the future, I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over, one that extends beyond the immediate market data we've discussed today.
Go ahead.
If a single maritime bottleneck and one vulnerable facility can instantaneously force the global economy to abandon natural gas and rapidly revert to burning coal just to maintain basic grid survival, what does that signify for the fragile timeline of global climate change goals?
That's a huge question.
When pushed to the absolute limit, will national security and immediate energy survival inherently trump long-term environmental progress?
That is a critical question to ponder, and one that will undoubtedly shape the trajectory of energy policy and infrastructure investment for the next decade. Thank you so much for joining us for today's deep dive. If you found this exploration of the hidden mechanics shaping our world valuable, please take a moment to like, subscribe, and share the show.
Your continued support allows us to keep bringing you these in-depth educational analyses.
Until next time, keep questioning the world around you.